Welcome to the two candidates for Florida State Senate District 12. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Mr. DeAguilera, since you were not here in the primary as Senator Thompson was, there are a couple of questions that we ask candidates when they come in, they're kind of housekeeping questions,
Sure.
but the answers sometimes turn out to be important. The first question is, have you been arrested before?
When I was 19, I paid a ticket late. The paperwork, I guess, did not go all the way through, and I guess my license was suspended. And so those collegiate years, I guess I was speeding a little too much. I was stopped on I-4 and got pulled over, and my license came out suspended, and I was there for an entire hour before it was noticed that, oh, your license was not, that you did pay everything. So it was a very eye-opening experience, and one thing that it did teach me is I would not like to visit that area anymore.
Okay, and then the other question is, have you ever declared bankruptcy?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, since you are the new person before us today, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and why it qualifies you for this office.
Sure. I had the honor of being born and raised right here in Central Florida, in actually Orlando, and was raised in District 12. That was my childhood home. I was educated inside the district, and I actually work in the district as well. For the last about 20 years, I have dedicated my life in the nonprofit world. That has been where I have been mostly employed in, and I've had a wonderful plethora of diverse areas that I just have had an honor to work for, from animal welfare to currently at the Down Syndrome Association, and also previously at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so that had given me such a wealth of wonderful information from some different areas in our community, from the special needs area to the business and the entrepreneurial spirit from the Hispanic community. I feel that our district is such a diverse area. We have some of the wealthiest zip codes to some of the most impoverished zip codes. I have said this before, and I'll say it again. I congratulate the senator for her service and her advocacy. 10 years of service in the legislature is not easy, and so I congratulate her. I do feel that I offer a fresh perspective, a fresh insight. That is something that I bring to the table. I feel that I also am able to cross party lines. I think that there is a visceral reaction that is unneeded right now with partisanship, and that I do happen to be from a different party that can aid in bridging some of those gaps that we have, so that folks do understand the unique needs in District 12. From, as I mentioned, from having the agricultural community, from tourism community, from the entrepreneurial community, that I think oftentimes is not as emphasized as they should be.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to switch to Senator Thompson. Do you have perhaps a two-partisan approach to accomplish things up in Tallahassee?
No, I had two bills that were passed in the last legislative session, passed unanimously, which meant that I had to have support from Republicans as well as Democrats. One was the amendment of Florida's wrongful incarceration statute, which would allow James Joseph Richardson to apply to be compensated for over 21 years that he spent in prison. And I had leadership from the Republican senators who assisted me with that bill. The other was to clarify that discrimination against pregnant women in the workforce is unlawful in the state of Florida. So I've demonstrated that I can work across party lines and bipartisanship with regard to getting legislation passed, as well as appropriations to address some of the issues in Senate District 12.
So, Mr. DeAguilera, then, are you running because you think you can bring a fresh perspective and have an insight into diversity, or are you running mostly because of perceived failings on the part of your opponent?
I said this to her very early on, that we wanted to run a positive campaign. We will have differences of opinions and perspectives of tackling very similar issues. I don't think that the senator is a failure, and that's not going to come out. Do I believe that she has been as effective as I would like her to be? I do have questions with that. She is, as I mentioned before, a wonderful advocate. Now, what I'm bringing to the table has very little to do with the incumbent. What it has to do with is that she has been there for 10 years. I do offer fresh perspective. That's the reality. I am willing to listen. I'm willing to not be bounded by partisan lines to get the job done. And because I have been in a particular party for some time, I do have at least a little bit of an insight on how my party thinks and how I can get these things done. And being in the nonprofit world, the one thing that you do learn, and you do learn that very quickly, is to do a lot with little, which I think that perspective needs to be brought to Tallahassee and hammered in continuously. And in addition to that, it also bridges gaps that need to be bridged, that some of these issues are not really partisan. These issues that we are all trying to do the right thing for our citizenry. That is really what the most important thing is. And if we come from different perspectives, and we may not necessarily agree on everything, you know, ultimately the goal is still the same. And the goal is to make the lives of our citizens as good as we possibly can, being a governmental entity.
But with all due respect to your desire to keep this campaign positive,
Sure.
you said that there were some questions that you had about her effectiveness.
Sure.
Can we drill down on that?
I will talk about some of the concerns. She has represented at least a portion of our district for over 10 years, 2 years as senator and 8 years as a state representative, and she has done a very respectful job in conveying her message and her ideas. One of the issues I have is the lack of really, advocacy can only get you so far. And though she's an eloquent speaker, and I respect her for that, and she speaks for a good large portion of our district and their beliefs, getting the job done is still essential. You can be a great cheerleader, you can be a great advocate, but at the end of the day, significant legislation is the only thing that changes the lives of the individuals in our district. That is one of the issues that when you look at her record, she has had some successes, and I give her full credit for that. But when you look at her entire career of significant legislation, it's just not there. It's just not there.
So you don't consider either of the two bills that she mentioned from this past session, the one on wrongful incarceration or the one on discrimination, barring discrimination against pregnant women, you don't consider that significant?
The barring discrimination against pregnant women was actually decided by the judicial side. She brought up the bill, but it was not voted on. It was a bill that was not necessarily needed because the judicial side already decided that being a woman also encompassed pregnancy. So I think it's a little bit of a misdirection. Yes, she brought it up, and absolutely great for bringing up an important issue, but the judicial side is the one who took care of it, not the legislative side.
Senator?
Let me clarify that I did file the bill. It was brought before committee in the Senate. It was voted on by the full Senate and passed unanimously. It was voted on in committee in the House before it reached the floor of the House. The Florida Supreme Court ruled that pregnancy was covered under the current civil rights statute. So the bill moved through the process, and so the support that we got from the legislature, I think, informed the judiciary when they were looking at whether or not they needed to act on this bill. And I do want to clarify that I was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2006. And I served there until 2012. So for those 6 years, I was a member of the House, and I've been a member of the Senate for the last 2 years. So I've been a legislator for 8 years, not 10. And one of the very first bills that I filed that was passed was a bill to outlaw the mutilation of young girls. We saw more young girls in our emergency rooms hemorrhaging, infected, because people would come from different countries, practice different customs, different traditions, and we found girls having their genitalia cut away, and I filed that bill. It passed the House and it passed the Senate. I also filed a bill that passed that allowed Florida to look at the issue of human trafficking. So since I have been a legislator, I have filed and passed significant legislation.
Well, you were talking about differences between you two, and clearly one of the differences is the definition of what significant legislation is. If you had been in office, tell me about some legislation that you would have brought to bear that would have helped your district.
Absolutely, and one of the areas is the expansion of the definition of enterprise zones. Currently, enterprise zones right now are really meant for existing companies, those that are already in, that are established, to really move to these areas to give them kind of an economic injection. One of the areas that I want to do is let's expand this enterprise zone. The entrepreneurial spirit is so alive and well. I was a former small business owner, so I understand completely what it is to start this little company and to start with a dream and to make it flourish. And working at the Hispanic Chamber, that was one of my favorite things to do, is talking to somebody who had a dream and making that company into a reality and assisting them along the way and seeing them have a success. So let's expand the idea of the enterprise zone by including those that want to start their business, having them lower the fees that states require to actually become incorporated, to make them like an S corporation, for example. Let's utilize these resources that we have. One of the interesting things as I walk home to home, one of the things that I notice, especially with a lot of folks, is they don't even know some of the services that are being offered. As a leader, that is our duty. Our duty is to educate folks as well as to also legislate. So they don't even really realize things like the Hispanic Business Initiative Fund even exists, or the Disney Entrepreneur Center. They get funding from the taxpayers pay portions of that area. HBIF is funded by both state, county, and city. So their taxpayer money is actually going to do this. Did they even realize that you can get a marketing plan, a business plan? Those are important, imperative things when you want to actually start a business. So that's one of the areas that I believe we can get bipartisan support, that the concept of starting the business, because as we know, small business is the backbone of the economy. I've said this many times during the Sun speech. The small business company of today is the Fortune 500 company of tomorrow. I want to make sure that we create and continue to have this and really flourish the environment where your dream can actually at least have a chance to become reality. So that's one of the areas that would be new legislation that has been talked about but never really pushed.
I'm curious, have you run for office before?
No, I have not.
Okay. What kind of experience do you have? You mentioned the Hispanic Chamber, but do you have any kind of experience working with government that you could apply to representing the district that would be helpful in that role?
Absolutely. I was for 4 years, I was in the advisory board for criminal abatement for the city of Orlando. I was the chair there. I also have served in several board capacities, with Orlando Health being one, Health Central previous to that. And I also worked for the city of Winter Garden for several years. And really helping their economic development. And I'm very proud of my service for the city of Winter Garden, and I assisted them with their Sentinel, which I think was the kickoff of the renaissance that has happened and continues to happen in that downtown corridor in Winter Garden, well, actually in the entire city of Winter Garden.
Do you think that Florida should increase its minimum wage?
I think that what we should do is fight more for earned income tax. I think that minimum wage credits, I should say. I think the minimum wage should be increased, not to the $10 Mark. I think that we need to be, it's a very easy, slippery slope. We have this concept that by increasing our minimum wage, that answers all the questions, and it doesn't. The reality is that the discussion needs to happen, but we also need to make sure that the business community is involved in this, especially our small businesses. What we have been seeing, and unfortunately a lot of our businesses that do offer that lower income are in the hospitality world, are in the fast food world. And with that, I've been noticing a lot of automation, lots of jobs. And ultimately, that is not our goal. I rather have a situation where they're getting an earned tax income credit, where they are able to not necessarily have a person, a student, a part-timer, be the beneficiary. What we're ultimately trying to do is to build better families, and those individuals that are in that hardship where they're working as many jobs as possible and they're trying to support their family, those are the goal folks that we're trying to help. And that is where that discussion needs to happen. So at preliminary, I'm not necessarily in favor of raising it, but can there be discussion? Is there a medium ground? One of the things that I've noticed is that so oftentimes we go on this side and we go on that side, that we're in polar opposites. Something that is missing is having that conversation, having that word. It's turned into a bad word, and it's called compromise. For some reason that we can't find areas where we agree. People want that. Families are built on compromise. My marriage is built on compromise. My wife ends up winning a lot more times than I do, but that's okay. But that is missing. And we need to make sure that we are able to. So initially my answer would be no. But am I going to shut the door and having organizations come in and promote what they're trying to say? Absolutely not. Because in that's debate. That's the magic of being able to govern to the masses, to everyone, and not just select few.
I want Senator Thompson to get a chance on minimum wage. Would you support a higher minimum wage in Florida?
Yes, I think the minimum wage should be $10.10 an hour. We have states in the nation that have raised their minimum wages to $15 an hour. We have people who go to work every day here in Central Florida who live in poverty. Florida and Central Florida, we have one of the lowest minimum wages in the nation. And so I fought last legislative session and will fight again to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour.
Is there anything else that you can think of that would help small businesses grow in your district that the state should consider?
In the last legislative session, I received appropriation for the National Entrepreneurial Center, as well as the Entrepreneurial Center at Bethune-Cookman University, where people not only learn how to get a job, but to create a job for themselves and for others. And we're talking about over $1 million between both of those institutions together. I also sponsored legislation to sunset and to re-examine the incentives that we give businesses that operate in what are classified as high crime areas. And I know the Sentinel focused on the fact that Universal Studios over the years have received millions of dollars for operating in a high crime area. The sheriff's office defines high crime as burglaries, assaults. They have specific criteria. When the boundaries were drawn for the high crime district, where Universal is located now, would have been high crime, but if you do your job effectively, you work yourself out of a job. And today we have the Mall of Millennia, we have Mercedes-Benz of South Orlando, we have Universal Studios who are getting these tax dollars for operating in a high crime area. My bill would say, let's not have this in perpetuity, let's go back, sunset it, let's look at it, which is what we do with most laws, and see if in fact these districts warrant this tax credit for operating in a high crime area. I would want to shift those dollars to Pine Hills, to south of Apopka, to Paramore, to many of the districts, many of the communities in the district that would benefit more than the ones that are benefiting from it now. I think all of those are things that deal with business and deal with entrepreneurship.
I wanted to bring up an issue that's been in the news lately. Mr. DeAguilera, would you support expanding casino gaming here in Florida?
No, no. As I mentioned before, I've had the honor of actually calling Orlando my home my entire life, and I'm going to speak very specifically to Central Florida. Casinos do not fit our brand. Casino would hurt us in the long run. The destination casino idea of having them in South Florida would hurt our convention business. And the last thing that I want to do is to change what Florida is all about, specifically Orlando. We have done an amazing job of bringing families. We are the capital of the world of family vacations. We want to continue that. Casinos would not aid in that. I know that there is this perceived concept of increased revenues from casinos. I think it's a Pandora's box. There are certain areas where the state would actually end up costing us money with all the additional crime that they bring, with all the additional gambling anonymous support. Those particular things, it would just be a wrong fit for our state. And the business community doesn't necessarily either want it either as well. Those that I have talked about, especially here in this particular district, just does not make sense for our brand. And I want to protect what Florida is. We have beaches, we have theme parks, we live in paradise. We have that honor of living there. We have casinos already with the reservations and the boating, going the day excursions and stuff. That's enough. We don't need to expand.
Thompson, do you have a different view?
I don't support the expansion of gambling in Florida. I don't support the destination resorts. That's the euphemism that people are using now. I have been in Central Florida since 1974, 40 years, and raised my family in Pine Hills. I have 3 children who attended Hiawassee Elementary, Robbinswood Middle School, and they all graduated from West Orange High School. I just received the endorsement of the West Orange Political Alliance, which represents Winter Garden and Ocoee and the western portion of the district. And Mr. DeAguilera has worked with those individuals. They feel that I am better suited to work with the cities and work with the individuals in West Orange County to accomplish what needs to happen in the legislature. I do think that we have been told, and I think it has been misleading, that an expansion of gambling would increase revenue in Florida. But when you look at Louisiana, you look at Mississippi, you look at Atlantic City, you see that it has not been the boom that it was supposed to be. And I think if you expand gambling, you attract other kinds of things where you then expend revenue with regard to gambling addiction. You're going to have to pay for more law enforcement individuals. You're going to have families that break up. So there are costs that come with that, and it doesn't bring the revenue that it is touted to bring. So I would not expand gambling.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. DeAguilera, do you think that Florida should accept federal funds under the Affordable Care Act to expand health care coverage in the state?
The answer is yes. That is our money. We pay for it. It is now time for this two-rate street to actually have that return home. I know that this is controversial in my party. That is where something of the benefit that I can bring to the table. I think we made a stand. Thank you very much. We now all know that the state legislature did not agree with the Affordable Care Act, but now it is time to deal with true economic issues. This will give us an opportunity. It is not the end-all of end-all. It's a very short answer, but it also gives us an opportunity to really put our footing with this new world, this new healthcare, with these new economic challenges that we do have. It is our money, and the answer is yes.
And Senator Thompson, just an opportunity to weigh in on that.
Absolutely. I think we should accept the $51 billion that we have sent to the federal government. When we send our income taxes, it's a one-way trip. And this is an opportunity to bring that money back to serve 1.2 million people in Florida who are uninsured. I served on the board of the West Orange Health District, which operates formerly Health Central Hospital. And what I saw serving on that board was that you had many people who ignored their symptoms when they were not feeling well, and they ended up in the emergency room at Health Central. The physicians who saw them had to be paid. The hospital had overhead that had to be met, and those funds had to come from somewhere. So we are subsidizing health care now for uninsured individuals. The care is not free. So those of us who have jobs, who have health insurance, we're already subsidizing the health care of people who end up in our emergency rooms. So I think this is an opportunity for people to have primary care physicians to get treatment early. It's easier to treat a cold than it is pneumonia. And so we would want people to be able to get the care at the earliest possible stage rather than the most expensive form of care, which is the emergency room.
Mr. DeAguilera, Senator Thompson brought up endorsements a little earlier.
Sure.
And I think reading your website, I noticed that you received an endorsement from the NRA, is that right?
I received an A rating from the NRA. Okay. There's no endorsement on it, yes.
Okay. So I guess my question is, what have you thought about recent gun policy here in Florida, such as the Stand Your Ground law? Did you support those particular laws?
You know, every law has its concerns. We are human, and I understand that certain laws cannot be perfect. The tweaking of Stand Your Ground has assisted that. Would I be surprised if more tweaking happens? Absolutely not. What I think the main issue is that there is a stigma when it comes to mental health. And there is a direct connection and correlation to these hideous crimes that do occur with mental health. And so instead of always blaming an item, because we can blame cars, guns are vital, but they're also for sports. They also are for protection. There's definitions that people put. I do not want to go against the responsible gun owner. And I will not go against the responsible gun owner. That is why I want to emphasize on things like helping to remove that stigma of mental health. If some of these horrendous crimes that have occurred, that we would have been able to catch them with these serious issues that they were having mentally, these crimes could have been averted. That's really where the serious issue comes. That is where our shame as leaders really needs to be taken care of. That is the area that we are not offering this support that needs to be offered, because there's a stigma, and we're all to blame for it.
So am I hearing that if you were elected to office, one of your charges would be to try to champion increased funding in mental health care in Florida, which is currently, I believe, 49th per capita in funding?
Absolutely, because what has to happen is the creation of not just championing money. Money only solves a certain amount of things. You know, it's very easy for us to just throw money and say that solves the answer. That's not always the case. Let's create some private public partnerships when we're dealing with those particular issues. That's where some of my nonprofit experience actually comes into play, where the funding does not have to all come from the taxpayer money. A portion of it can, but how about having some of our gun-related companies that have presence here in Florida? How about them offering some support? These are areas that we can open up these ideas and concepts to be creative in funding some of these concerns. The main concern, number one, is the stigma. It's being able to open and talk publicly about depression, about having some of these other concerns that are giving you mental challenges. You can talk about health concerns, diabetes or leukemia. People don't have a stigma with those issues. but they do have a stigma when it comes to mental health because there's this perceived idea that you are stronger than that. And so that is one of the number one issues that need to be dealt with, let alone the funding.
And Senator Thompson, stand your ground.
I filed a bill in the last legislative session to repeal Stand Your Ground, which allows people to act on their fears rather than on the facts. The law says that if you believe, if you think, if you feel that someone has a weapon and your life is in danger or you're in danger of grave bodily harm, you can use lethal force, deadly force, and kill someone. And juries have found people not guilty even though there were no weapons found, even though there were no assaults, no aggression on the part of the person who was killed. And I think the current law leads to a last man standing kind of determination with regard to the outcome. It's the last man standing who gets to present the version of what happened because the other person is dead. And so I think it encourages people to make sure that the other person is dead, because then it's only their version of what happened that will be considered. And I believe that the aggressor, under no circumstances, should be able to claim self-defense under Stand Your Ground. My bill was not heard. At least the House heard the bill to repeal it, voted it down, but I will work to amend it to at least exclude the aggressor from being able to claim Stand Your Ground.
What about the mental health component that Mr. DeAguilera mentioned?
The legislature passed a law that says that people who have been Baker Acted, and that was a law that I supported. If you have been Baker Acted and it's been demonstrated that you are a danger to yourself or to others, you now cannot buy a gun. So we are looking at that, and we understand that that is a problem, and we'll continue to work on it.
Right now, you may be aware the Florida Education Association just recently filed suit challenging the school voucher program in Florida. Do you support that lawsuit?
I do, absolutely. I think that any educational institution that receives public tax dollars ought to be bound by the same standards that traditional public schools are bound by. That means that the teachers ought to be certified. They are not required to be certified in the for-profit schools that are operated by the people who receive the vouchers. Not only do the teachers not need certification, you don't need a standard curriculum in the for-profit schools. And the biggest thing is assessment. We require particular assessment of students in our traditional public schools, and those assessments are not required in the for-profit schools that receive vouchers. So if these schools are going to make a buck off of the backs of our children, they should be bound by the same standards. And I do support the lawsuit filed by FEA.
So should the non-profit parochial schools also be bound by the same
any school?
requirements?
Yes, any school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the problems. We have right now a separation of church and state, and you're now seeing public tax dollars that are going to religious schools, and that presents a problem as well. If you're going to give funds to religious schools, do we give it only to Christian schools? Do we give it to Muslim schools? Do we give it to Buddhist schools? Or do we maintain a separation of church and state? And I think that's the question.
Mr. DeAguilera, do you support the suit?
No, I do not.
Mm-hmm.
Working in the Down Syndrome Association, one of the greatest gifts is that I deal with a population that is gifted in so many different ways. They have been the benefactor of school choice. The reality is, and this is a much larger issue than just vouchers and parental choice. This is an education issue. And one of the things that we need to see as a society is that we are trying to say that education is all the same, that every child is educated in the same exact way, and that's not a reality. Public schools, as wonderful as they are, my wife works in the public school system and my children are being taught in the public school system, so I'm a supporter of public schools. But the reality is that not every child is the same, and not every child can go down the same road and same pathway. We need to realize that there are differences. We need to realize that there are different areas where a child can get educated, whether it's homeschooling, whether it is allowing the parent to be part of that decision-making process for their child's education. This is where the issue comes into place and where I differ with the senator. She keeps on saying taxpayer money. It is, but it's that parent's money. As if they own a home, they are paying into their system. They are paying their child's education through public school, and we're not allowing them to have very much flexibility. That is where the concern is, because if you are then decide your child needs to go to an alternative school and there is a tuition, you're now limiting those that can get that education. Even though they're paying for the public school, even though their money is going directly there, they're now paying additional too. So we need to kind of come up with a compromise somewhere in the middle. See, what I've found again, and I know I've said this before, is there's a line that's been drawn in the sand. And those that are against vouchers are against them, and they refuse to have a conversation. And those that are for vouchers are for it, and they refuse to have a conversation. The reality is that we're in the middle. There is an answer. And the answer is, not one answer doesn't fit all. And once we start realizing this individual component and allowing folks to make choices and giving folks that responsibility, we will see how education can better itself. The public school systems have not failed our children. We have failed our children.
What about the accountability component that the senator spoke to?
Absolutely. Folks need to be accountable. There are several situations with charter schools that have gone belly up. There are certain situations with misappropriation of funds. Accountability needs to be across the board. There's a nice compromise right there. Let's give parents a choice, but to those schools that also allow themselves to be accountable.
Mm-hmm. So would you support a requirement for end-of-course testing at parochial schools that accept students with state vouchers?
I have absolutely no problem, and I will tell you, I will speak personally here. I am a product of parochial school. I went to St. John Vianney, I went to Bishop Moore. There were final tests, and very arduous ones.
Right.
So this is not a mandate that a school cannot take. It's a mandate that a school that wishes to open themselves up to this opportunity, why not? Let's have these conversations. Because right now it's a yes or no. And there's not a, well, what exactly do tests you want? Right now, and to even go further on the test, right now we're testing our children too much. Let's just call that, a spade right here. We are over-testing our children. When you have school districts that are trying to opt out but can't because of funding, that tells you everything right now, that we are testing our children too much. Now, if a school wants to have a certain level of accountability and they want to accept voucher money, why not? They're educating our children, and if a parent sees that this is the right route for the best interest of my family and my child, why is that taboo?
Well, I think we're going to conclude today's discussion. We appreciate your coming in.
Thank you. Thank you.